In this scene, we'll take a look at how to composite the different render layers we've created and rendered out. As you can see, Maya has already rendered our images into different folders according to the render layers, and we'll be using a compositing package called Adobe After Effects to reassemble our image. You can use any compositing package such as Fusion or the Foundry's Nuke to accomplish the same goal. We'll go ahead and we'll import our background first by just dragging it into the Project tab, and once the project is in, we'll lower that into the timeline here, and that'll display it over here. You can see we've got 20 frames of this simple animation as we scrub back and forth. Let's go ahead and bring in the background fruit by dragging that over, and then we'll pull that and place the layer on top of the previous layer. As you can see, it snaps right on top. We'll go ahead and pull in the middle ground fruit and place that on top of our scene. And finally, we'll bring in our foreground fruit. And we'll place that on top of everything as well. And now we've created a full composite of the different layers rendered out from our scene. What this allows us to do is to have more control over the different elements of our scene. For example, I can very easily go into the opacity settings for the foreground fruit and create a bit of a ghosting effect. I could also very easily change the coloring. For example, if I go into color corrections, I can change the levels of the fruit in front to make them lighter without having to re-render anything and without needing to adjust the entire frame. We'll go ahead and we'll make that fruit just a little bit darker. And control in composite of different elements is a huge time saver than rather going back into your scene and having to re-render everything out again just to get some of the pieces of your scene a little bit darker. One thing you may have noticed is that our scene is conspicuously missing its shadows. If we render the entire project together, you'll see that you've got some nice shadows between the objects. What we're going to want to do is create a shadow pass in Maya as its own separate render layer. And because the shadow pass is going to require all of the objects in the scene, what we'll do instead of creating a new render layer, we'll just copy one of the existing layers, and that's the master layer. Selecting the master layer, go to copy layer, and that will make a new layer. Let's enable that by clicking that icon. And with the middle mouse button, I'm going to drag the window all the way to the top. I'll double click on the name, and I will call this Shadow Pass. This will be my shadow pass. If I render this right now, I'll get the same exact thing as I did in the master layer. But handy in Maya is the ability to create the shadow pass very easily. I'll right click on the shadow pass layer and I'll choose attributes. That'll open up the attribute editor. Let's see, it didn't quite work. Let's go back and again, click on the shadow pass and click on attributes. There we go. We have the shadow pass attributes, and here there's a whole bunch of controls. Maya has a preset for a shadow pass, and simply click on the preset button and select shadow, and it will set everything up. I'll hit Control A to go back to our channel box and render layer, and you'll see that this little icon now has a little bit of red in it. This signifies that there is a render layer override set to the scene and that Maya has changed what this is going to look like. Let's go ahead and render this frame. And what you now see is a completely black render. Well, where's my shadows? The way that the shadow pass works in the preset in Maya is that it places the shadows in the alpha channel of the object. And here we go. We have the render pass. So all we need to do now, we have all the other passes rendered out. We just need to render out the 20 frames of the shadow pass. I'll go ahead and I'll disable the other render layers we already have. And I'll go ahead and batch render the shadow pass by itself by going to render and batch render. When this render completes, we'll be able to have the shadow pass to put into composite. And now we're done with the render. You can see that there's a shadow pass folder in the images along with the other layers. When we take a look in one of them, you'll see with the alpha channel, you get the shadows exactly as needed. We'll go back into Adobe After Effects and we'll grab the shadow pass folder and we'll want to put it into the projects. I'll just drag that folder over and now we have our shadow pass. I will lay this shadow pass layer on top of all the other layers, and because of the alpha channel, the shadows pop right in. If I press T, I'll have access to the opacity layer, and I'll be able to control the amount of shadow that I see to taste. And that's it. We've been able to successfully composite our render layers together to get our scene. In this video, we took a look at how to create a composite using render layers and a shadow pass to recreate our scene and have intimate control over the different parts of our scene.